The universe had always been vast, older than anyone could truly imagine. It's filled with countless worlds, civilizations, and histories that stretched beyond comprehension. Among all of them, there was a counselor silent, careful gathering of beings who had long since learned to organize the chaos of countless stars. Each civilization had its place in this order. Each had a seat at the table where decisions were made, where alliances were shaped, and where the direction of the universe was quietly steered. But there was one seat that was always empty, a seat that had been reserved for a world that had never shown up. That seat belonged to Earth. For as long as the Council had existed, Earth remained a mystery. The observers, beings who could see across light years without moving their bodies, had noticed humans a long time ago. They had watched as humans struggled to survive on a small, blue planet spinning in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. These watchers had documented wars, triumphs, discoveries, and mistakes, keeping careful notes of every significant moment. And yet, despite this attention, humanity never asked for permission. They never reached out to the wider universe. They never even knew there was a table waiting for them. Life on Earth began quietly, without fanfare. For billions of years, the planet spun under the sun, growing, shifting, and forming life. At first, it was nothing but simple organisms, slowly crawling, swimming, and adapting. The universe, in its distant calm, did not care. But somewhere, in its infinite gaze, the watchers noticed. Every spark of life mattered to those who had learned the cost of ignoring the small and fragile. Life on Earth was small, chaotic, unpredictable. And that alone was fascinating. As humans finally appeared, the observers paid closer attention. They watched as humans discovered fire, tools, and language. They watched as humans built settlements, fought wars, and created art. Everything humans did was messy, uncertain, and full of contradictions. They were violent, yet compassionate. They were selfish, yet capable of selfless courage. And through it all, they never thought about the rest of the universe. They never asked if they were allowed to live, to grow, or to reach for the stars. This lack of concern puzzled the observers. Every other civilization that had grown to a certain level of intelligence eventually sought recognition, or at least guidance. They sent signals, created ambassadors, and joined the council when they were invited. But humans did none of these things. They did not seek permission because they never believed permission was necessary. This was not arrogance in the usual sense. It was simple determination, a quiet insistence that life belonged to those who lived it, not to those who claimed authority over it. The observers saw countless moments that defined humans. They saw a group of people work together to survive a harsh winter, sharing food, warmth, and knowledge. They saw humans argue, fight, and sometimes betray one another, only to come together again when survival demanded it. They watched humans sail across oceans they did not understand, climb mountains too high to be natural, and venture into deserts that offered nothing but danger. In every case, humans acted without asking permission from each other, from nature, or from anyone beyond their world. And this was both alarming and fascinating to the watchers. Humans built cities that reached toward the sky, structures that should have been impossible for such fragile beings. They created art, music, and literature that expressed ideas beyond their own lives. They invented machines that carried them faster, farther, and higher than any animal could travel. The observers took note of every achievement, comparing them to civilizations older and more advanced. Some laughed at the simplicity of human technology, some were impressed and some worried. Humans were unpredictable. Unpredictability was dangerous in a universe that valued order. Wars on Earth were frequent, but they were also strange. Humans would destroy themselves in conflicts, yet they would rebuild, often stronger and more determined. The observers noted that humans had no clear plan beyond survival and progress. They fought for land, for resources, for belief systems, and sometimes for nothing at all. But even in their chaos, humans learned. They learned from mistakes, adapted to failures, and occasionally created moments of extraordinary cooperation and compassion. These moments were rare, but when they occurred, they were powerful enough to leave the watchers stunned. And yet, through all of it, humans never looked beyond their sky in a serious way until very recently. They gazed at stars with wonder, they imagined life elsewhere, and they dreamed of reaching other worlds. But they did not understand the council, the networks of civilizations beyond their comprehension, or the silent protocols that govern the cosmos. Humans were not invited, and they did not know it. They were never excluded out of malice, they simply existed in a bubble of their own making, entirely unaware of the rules they were breaking by living their lives on their own terms. The observers sometimes wondered if humans were ready to join the council. They debated quietly among themselves. Some believed that humans could never learn the discipline required, that their recklessness would be a danger to everyone else. Others argued that humans' independence was exactly what the universe needed. A species that did not rely on permission, that refused to wait for approval, could push boundaries no one else dared approach. But no consensus was reached. Earth's seat remained vacant, waiting, or perhaps deliberately left empty. Despite the council's attention, humans remained focused on themselves. They explored their own world, first its mountains, rivers, deserts, and oceans. They marveled at the patterns of the sky, recorded the cycles of the moon, and eventually began sending machines into space. Each step was small, and yet monumental. Every achievement, however minor it seemed, added to the unseen record kept by the watchers. And still, humans never asked for permission. They did not seek validation. They did not wait for approval. They simply acted as they always had. The council observed quietly as humans began to reach further. Satellites circled Earth, sending signals back. Rockets carried humans into the sky, and eventually, they set foot on the moon. Each achievement was recorded meticulously. The watchers saw humans experiment, fail, and try again. They were inefficient, chaotic, and sometimes dangerous, but they were unstoppable. The council began to recognize a truth that they could not ignore. Humans did not need permission, and they did not wait for it. From the perspective of the universe, humans seemed reckless, yet strangely inspiring. They had no grand plan to join the wider order, no ceremony to mark their existence in the cosmos, and no deference to ancient rules. They moved forward with the confidence of those who knew life was fleeting and that waiting for approval could be fatal. In every crisis, humans learned, adapted, and continued, often through sheer willpower alone. The observers began to understand that humanity's greatest strength was not technology. Intelligence or strategy was the refusal to stop. And so, Earth's seat remained vacant. The universe did not punish humans for their ignorance or inattention. It simply recorded, observed, and waited. The watchers saw humanity struggle with disease, famine, and conflict, yet each time humans rose again. They learned to communicate, to travel, to explore, and to create. They questioned their place in the universe without ever fully understanding it. And in this ignorance, they were free. Free to act without fear of judgment, free to take risks that no one else would consider, and free to grow in ways no one could control. The observers realized that the empty seat was no longer a mark of absence. It was a sign that humanity had chosen its own path, without consulting anyone. The emptiness was not a deficiency, was proof of independence. No other civilization had so clearly refused authority or ignored invitation while still achieving so much. Humans had never asked for permission, and yet they had shaped the world in ways far beyond expectation. As centuries passed, the council continued its quiet observations. The record of humanity grew thicker, with every century, every decade, every year. Humans discovered electricity, medicine, flight, and eventually space travel. They struggled, fought, and sometimes failed spectacularly, but always they moved forward. And still, no human ever stopped to ask if they were allowed, if they belonged, or if they were ready. The seat remained empty. And yet humanity's presence was undeniable. The watchers began to understand a truth that humans themselves would never articulate. Humans did not need permission because their lives were proof that permission was irrelevant. Life was theirs to live, knowledge theirs to seek, and survival theirs to demand. They were chaotic, fragile, and fleeting, but in that chaos, there was a strength the universe could not control. The empty seat, long a symbol of absence, became a symbol of defiance. Humanity had never asked for permission, and that alone made them remarkable. Even now, in the quiet darkness of space, observers still watch Earth. They watch humans build, create, destroy, and rebuild. They watch ordinary people rise to challenges no one could anticipate. They watch the stubborn insistence of a species that refuses to wait. And they wait, too, wondering when or if humans will ever realize there is a seat at the table, or if humanity will continue, as it always has, shaping its own destiny without ever asking for permission. Even though humans never asked for permission, the universe noticed them. Observers, ancient beings who could see across light years and through time, watched quietly, recording the details of human life. Every small act, every achievement, every failure was noted. Humans did not know they were being watched, and yet, in their ignorance, they revealed something extraordinary. Humans were loud in their own way. Their cities throbbed with noise and movement. Machines hummed, wheels turned, engines roared, and voices filled the air. In forests, mountains, and deserts, humans moved cautiously, adapting to harsh conditions, building tools, and finding solutions to problems that had existed for centuries. They were restless, always seeking, always moving, always trying. Observers often remarked that humans seemed to have energy that came from nowhere, as if the very act of striving sustained them. From the perspective of the wider universe, humans were unpredictable. Other civilizations had rules, protocols, and traditions that guided their growth. They knew when to act, when to wait, and when to speak. Humans did not follow rules beyond the ones they invented themselves. Sometimes this led to disaster. Sometimes it led to brilliance. Either way, it made humans fascinating to watch. Humans learned quickly, though not always wisely. A simple invention could change everything, and sometimes it did. Fire, the wheel, writing, and eventually electricity all had consequences far beyond what humans intended. The observers saw that humans often created solutions that solved one problem but caused another. Yet humans adapted again. They learned from mistakes, even when the cost was high. Their resilience was unlike anything else in the universe. Observers noted something else about humans. They were deeply emotional. Anger, fear, joy, grief, love. These feelings shaped decisions in ways that logic could not predict. Wars were fought not only over resources but over beliefs, pride, and ideas. Families protected each other with fierce determination. Strangers helped each other, sometimes risking their own lives. Art, music, and storytelling flourished because humans needed to express emotions that words alone could not contain. In this emotional turbulence, humans grew stronger, more complex, more unpredictable. Despite all of this, humans rarely looked outward. They explored their own world first, learning its limits and possibilities. Oceans were crossed, mountains climbed, deserts tamed, forests explored. They mapped their planet, naming its rivers, mountains, and valleys. They learned to grow food, harness water, and build shelters. Every discovery was a step toward survival, a step toward understanding the world around them. Yet they did all this without concern for what lay beyond their sky. The observers sometimes debated among themselves about whether humans would ever notice the universe beyond their planet. Some believed humans were too focused on themselves, too small and fragile to reach further. Others argued that humans' persistence made them unique, capable of achieving what no other species could. They had no instructions, no guidance, and no counsel to answer to. Yet they moved forward anyway, driven by curiosity, necessity, and a strange stubbornness that refused to be explained as technology advanced. Humans began to reach beyond Earth. They sent rockets, satellites, and eventually explorers into space. The observers recorded these events with great interest. Each attempt was imperfect, sometimes failing spectacularly, yet humans persisted. They learned quickly from errors, improved designs, and tried again. They did not wait for approval, they did not consult the wider universe, and they never paused to ask if they were allowed. Their independence was both alarming and inspiring. The universe noticed patterns in human behavior. Humans often acted without thinking about consequences beyond their immediate world. They could destroy and rebuild, make mistakes, and recover, break, and repair. In their chaos, there was creativity. In their impatience, there was progress. In their refusal to wait for guidance, there was freedom. The observers began to understand that humans' refusal to ask permission was not defiance alone. It was a fundamental part of their survival. Humans' creativity often emerged in unexpected ways. A single mind could invent something that changed millions of lives. Sometimes it was technology, sometimes art, sometimes new ways of thinking. Communities adapted these ideas rapidly. Knowledge spread in ways that other species found astonishing. Humans were inefficient in their methods, often reinventing what already existed. Yet they were unstoppable. Progress was messy, slow, and chaotic, but it moved forward relentlessly. Observers also watched human failures with a mix of concern and fascination. Entire societies could collapse under war, famine, or disease. Natural disasters struck without warning, and humans often struggled to survive. And yet, somehow they endured. They rebuilt cities, recovered knowledge, and found new solutions. Their ability to survive was not just physical, it was moral and emotional. Humans refused to give up on themselves, even when the odds were impossible. This tenacity was evident in every corner of Earth, in deserts where water was scarce. Humans developed irrigation systems. In forests where predators roamed, humans built shelters and tools. In cold climates, humans discovered fire, clothing, and shelter that allowed them to survive freezing winters. They learned to navigate mountains, rivers, and oceans. Every challenge became an opportunity to adapt. And all of this happened without asking for guidance from the universe, without seeking validation, and without waiting for approval. The observers began to notice patterns in human conflict as well. Wars were frequent and often devastating. They were fought for land, resources, pride, or ideology. Humans sometimes destroyed themselves entirely, yet they always rebuilt. They learned from failure, adapted, and sometimes created new societies that were stronger or wiser. These cycles of destruction and renewal fascinated the watchers. Unlike other civilizations that sought order first and growth second, humans grew first and found order later, or sometimes never at all. Their unpredictability was a kind of strength KSDs had mastered. Humans also had moments of extraordinary cooperation. When disaster struck, strangers became allies. Communities organized themselves to rescue, rebuild, and protect. Families extended beyond bloodlines, connecting people who had no reason to trust each other. Humans were capable of immense generosity and courage, sometimes in direct contrast to their greed or violence. Observers recorded these moments carefully, noting that humans often thrived not because of planning or protocol, but because of instinct, emotion, and choice. Despite the chaos, humans kept pushing outward. They built ships, aircraft, and eventually spacecraft. They looked toward the moon, the planets, and the stars, imagining what might be possible. At first, exploration was slow and uncertain. Failures were frequent, some catastrophic. But humans learned quickly. They refined technology, improved methods, and continued reaching farther. Their persistence became a defining trait. The observers could not predict where humans would go next, only that they would continue moving forward. The more the observers watched, the more they realized that humans were unlike any other civilization. Humans did not follow ancient rules or seek permission to act. They did not wait for a council to decide what they could or could not do. They acted because they had no choice. They had to survive, they had to adapt, and they had to grow. And in doing so, they carved a path that was entirely their own, even when faced with existential threats. Humans did not hesitate. They responded with creativity, resourcefulness, and courage. They organized, experimented, and sometimes failed spectacularly, only to rise again. They made tools, machines, and strategies that seemed impossible for their fragile bodies and limited knowledge. And all the while they did not ask the universe for guidance, nor did they seek permission to exist. They acted as if the world belonged entirely to them. Even though they were small, fragile, and vulnerable, observers debated what this meant for the future. Some worried that humans would eventually destroy themselves, that their recklessness would make them a danger to themselves and others. Others argued that humans' independence was their greatest asset, that their refusal to wait for permission would eventually lead them to achievements beyond imagination. One thing was certain: humans could not be controlled, predicted, or ignored. They were a force entirely their own, shaped by choice, necessity, and relentless determination. From afar, the universe waited and watched as humans reached higher. Satellites orbited Earth, mapping the surface. Probes were sent to nearby planets. Humans ventured into orbit, then to the moon. Each step was small in cosmic terms, yet monumental in human terms. The observers marveled at the persistence, ingenuity, and courage required to accomplish these feats. And all of it was done without consultation or permission. Humans did not seek approval, because they did not understand the concept of waiting for permission to live. Even the council began to take notice. They had long considered Earth irrelevant or insignificant. Now they understood that the planet's inhabitants were not just surviving, they were growing, learning, and shaping their destiny in ways that could not be ignored. Humans were chaotic, unpredictable, and messy, but they were alive, thriving, and moving forward. And they had done all of this while refusing to acknowledge anyone else's authority. Humans were becoming a story that the universe had to reckon with. They had not asked for permission to exist, explore, or create. They had not waited for validation from older civilizations. And yet, through determination, resilience, and choice, they had achieved something remarkable. They had proven that life, even fragile and imperfect, could shape its own path without waiting for the universe to approve. The Watchers continued to record, taking note of patterns, breakthroughs, failures, and triumphs. They understood that humans were still in their infancy in cosmic terms. They had not yet ventured beyond their star system in any meaningful way. But they had a quality no other species possessed: a refusal to wait. They acted, survived, created, and learned on their own terms. And that made all the difference. Humans had always looked to the stars with wonder. But now they were beginning to notice something else, something that felt both strange and urgent. It started with subtle signs. Signals appeared in radio waves, strange anomalies that scientists could not explain. Satellites would malfunction for no reason. Instruments designed to detect cosmic radiation picked up patterns that repeated too deliberately to be natural. At first, humans assumed it was a technical glitch, or perhaps interference from the sun. But as the phenomena became more frequent, curiosity turned into concern. Observers in the distant reaches of space watched with quiet anticipation. They had waited for centuries to see how humans would react if something beyond Earth's control reached them. Many believed that humans would panic, retreat, or collapse under the pressure. Some even predicted that humanity would fail entirely. But the Watchers were underestimating one thing: humans did not wait for permission. Even when danger appeared, the first undeniable moment came when a signal was received that no human device could have sent. It was deliberate, structured, and unmistakably intelligent. The message was incomprehensible at first, a series of tones, pulses, and patterns unlike anything humans had created. Scientists spent months trying to decode it, collaborating across nations, across disciplines, driven by the need to understand. Even in confusion, humans were curious. They were determined to find meaning where none seemed obvious. This event marked the beginning of a new reality. Humanity realized that they were not alone, not just in the sense of life existing somewhere else, but in the sense that something beyond Earth was reaching toward them. Some feared it. Some wanted to respond immediately. Others argued that ignoring the signal was safer. Debate raged in laboratories, in governments, and in homes. Yet through it all, humans continued their work. They did not wait for permission from the universe or from anyone else. They acted because action was necessary, because understanding could not wait, As humans experimented with the signals, strange things began to happen in orbit and in space. Satellites would behave unpredictably, drifting or turning as if guided by invisible hands. Communication systems sometimes failed and then mysteriously resumed. Data was altered in ways that suggested intelligence, but always with precision, never enough to cause destruction. Humans were unsettled, but they were not defeated. They adapted, creating new instruments, writing new codes, and observing carefully. Each challenge was met with persistence and ingenuity. The very traits that had allowed humanity to survive on Earth for millennia, observers noted how humans reacted. Unlike other civilizations that might have panicked or retreated under similar circumstances, humans leaned into the problem. They studied, they tested, they debated, and they risked failure because waiting was not an option. Their curiosity overrode fear. Their stubbornness overrode caution. And for the watchers, it was remarkable to see a species respond to an external force with such determination rather than submission. As months passed, the signals became clearer. Patterns emerged that hinted at a presence, intelligence that was observing Earth as closely as humans were now trying to observe it. Humans began to speculate, imagining everything from alien life to advanced probes sent to study their planet. Governments formed committees, scientists built labs, and private organizations invested resources beyond imagination. There was no consensus, no single answer, but humans did not stop. They had never waited for guidance, and they would not begin now. The signals were not always consistent. Sometimes they appeared in bursts, other times they were quiet. Humans began to detect anomalies on the ground as well. Instruments recorded strange energy surges in remote regions. Some researchers found patterns in weather, magnetic fields, or even the behavior of animals that seemed linked to the signals. It was as if the planet itself was responding. Panic threatened to take hold at times, but humans pushed forward, experimenting, hypothesizing, and learning. Fear was present, but it never paralyzed them. In the midst of uncertainty, humanity's resourcefulness shone brightest. Teams of engineers and scientists collaborated in ways never seen before. International cooperation intensified, as if the challenge of understanding the signals had unified the species. Every discovery, every failure, every small breakthrough became part of a collective effort. Humans did not wait for instructions. They created their own plans, took risks, and improvised. And each small success strengthened their determination to continue. Observers continued to watch, amazed at the resilience and ingenuity of humans. They saw ordinary people rise to extraordinary challenges. People who had never been trained in advanced sciences contributed ideas that proved critical. Farmers, pilots, engineers, and artists all found ways to help interpret the signals. Humans were messy, chaotic, and unpredictable, but they were united in curiosity and action. No other species had ever responded so quickly, so creatively, or so bravely to an unknown force. Then came the first visible sign. A spacecraft, not human in origin, appeared at the edge of the solar system. It was not large by cosmic standards, but it was deliberate, moving with precision and intelligence. Humans detected it through instruments designed for exploration, and the world held its breath. No one knew whether the craft was hostile, curious, or merely observing. Governments debated response strategies, while scientists analyzed every available piece of data. And yet, humans did not freeze in fear. They prepared, they studied, and they planned. Knowing that inaction was never an option, the arrival of the unknown craft changed everything. It forced humanity to confront the reality that the universe was active, aware, and capable of influence. Yet humans reacted in a way that was uniquely their own. They did not immediately assume danger, nor did they wait for the universe to communicate with them further. They observed, analyzed, and adapted. This reaction, careful but fearless, curious but prepared, defined the human response to the unknown. As humans studied the craft, patterns emerged that suggested intent. It moved in ways that indicated intelligence, scanning, and analysis. Humans speculated endlessly. Was it a probe? A messenger? A scout for something larger? Debates raged, theories multiplied, and experiments multiplied alongside them. Every human being who learned of the craft felt something new, a mixture of fear, curiosity, excitement, and the instinct to act. And act they did, without hesitation, without permission, and without delay. Observers noted the significance of these moments. Humans were facing forces far beyond anything they had previously encountered. And yet they remained focused on discovery and survival. They did not wait for instructions from any council, any superior intelligence, or any cosmic authority. They relied on ingenuity, collaboration, and courage. And in doing so, they proved that the species that had always refused permission was not only alive, but ready to shape its own destiny. Communication with the craft was attempted. Signals were sent, repeated, and refined, as humans worked tirelessly to establish understanding. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and humans persisted through failure and frustration. Each attempt, even when it failed, taught something new. Patterns emerged. Responses were subtle, deliberate, and measured. Humans were beginning to understand that they were not alone in the universe, and that understanding required patience, creativity, and persistence. Meanwhile, the rest of the planet continued. Life went on, even as humanity faced its greatest challenge yet. People worked, traveled, built, and fought. Ordinary life children, going to school, families gathering. Markets opening continued alongside extraordinary efforts to comprehend the craft. Humanity did not pause its daily existence, nor did it retreat in fear. Humans had always faced uncertainty with resilience, and this was simply a new form of uncertainty. Larger in scale, but not fundamentally different in spirit. The presence of the craft also inspired humanity. Artists created works imagining the beings behind the signals. Writers penned stories that speculated on contact, curiosity, and the meaning of intelligence. Engineers and scientists shared knowledge openly, driven by the urgency of discovery. Even those not directly involved felt a connection to the event. A sense that humanity was standing together in the face of something vast and unknown. The human response was both practical and emotional, grounded in reality, yet elevated by imagination. As observation continued, humans noticed that the craft seemed to respond to their actions. Movements, signals, and experiments were mirrored, adjusted, or acknowledged in subtle ways. This interaction was not aggressive, but it was deliberate. Humans felt both awe and apprehension. They understood that the universe was no longer distant. It had become an active participant in their lives. Yet humans did not falter. They learned, adapted, and moved forward. Fear existed, but it never dictated action. Humanity was not waiting for permission, and it never would. The observers, watching from far beyond, began to take the presence of humans more seriously. They realized that humans were capable of handling challenges that other species might have failed to meet. Humans were messy, impulsive, and unpredictable, but they were persistent, intelligent, and courageous. Their response to the unknown craft proved that they were growing in ways the universe had not expected. Humans were no longer just a species of Earth. They were a species reaching into the universe on their own terms. By the end of the first year of contact, humanity had achieved remarkable understanding. They could interpret patterns, predict movements, and respond in ways that kept them safe while gathering knowledge. The craft remained distant, mysterious, and powerful, yet humans had learned to act within this challenge. Their resilience, creativity, and refusal to wait for permission had carried them into new territory. They were no longer simply surviving. They were thriving in the presence of the unknown, even in the face of uncertainty. Humans continued to explore, experiment, and learn. Every attempt, failure, and small success became part of the growing story of humanity's place in the universe. Humans had never asked for permission, and now, faced with an entirely new reality, they continued to act with courage, curiosity, and determination. The observers understood a fundamental truth. Humans were becoming a force that could not be ignored. Humans had never intended to make a mark beyond their own world. Yet with each step, they did. The the signals, the craft, and the anomalies they had observed were no longer mysteries to be feared. They had become a challenge to be met. Scientists and engineers worked together across continents, pooling knowledge, resources, and intuition in ways that defied boundaries. The planet's attention, for the first time, was united toward understanding something that existed beyond human control. The more humans learned, the more they realized that the universe was not a distant observer, but an active participant. The craft's movements, its responses to signals, and even its subtle adjustments to the solar environment indicated intelligence capable of analysis and strategy. Humans could not predict its actions with certainty, yet they were learning to adapt, to anticipate, and to respond in ways that often matched the craft's complexity. It was not communication as they knew it. It was more like a conversation in a language of observation, patterns, and intent. Despite the uncertainty, humans thrived. Their curiosity drove them forward, their persistence fueled innovation, and their courage ensured that failure was never final. Each experiment, each attempt to understand the craft, produced new knowledge. Data from satellites, probes, and telescopes was analyzed with precision, tested in laboratories, and applied in practical ways. Humans discovered methods to detect patterns in energy fields, subtle shifts in gravitational waves, and variations in cosmic radiation that had previously gone unnoticed. Every discovery was a step toward comprehension. Yet humans did not stop at observation, they acted. The craft itself became an unspoken teacher. It moved in ways that forced humans to think differently, to create solutions that were not only new, but radical. Engineers built systems capable of analyzing information faster than ever before. Scientists proposed theories that challenged conventional understanding. Humans developed communication methods that relied not on speech or writing, but on mathematics, patterns, and shared observation. It was not easy. Mistakes were made. Systems failed. Predictions were wrong. Yet humans persisted, refusing to allow setbacks to halt progress. Observers from across the universe noted this persistence. They had seen many civilizations encounter unknown intelligence. Some panicked, some collapsed, some withdrew entirely. Humans did none of these things. They adapted. They collaborated. They acted with ingenuity, courage, and independence. It was becoming clear that humans were not merely responding to external forces, they were shaping the interaction, influencing outcomes, and asserting themselves in subtle but undeniable ways. Even as humans achieved breakthroughs, life on Earth continued. People went about daily routines, built cities, raised families, and worked in industries that were not directly connected to space exploration. Yet everything humans did now resonated with new meaning. The discoveries made in laboratories and control rooms rippled across the planet. Innovations in energy, computing, and communication improved ordinary life, creating a feedback loop in which survival, curiosity, and ambition reinforced one another. Humans were building a civilization capable of handling challenges beyond their world while simultaneously nurturing life at home. As understanding deepened, the craft began to display behaviors that suggested recognition. Humans noticed subtle changes in its movements and patterns. The anomalies that had once seemed random became deliberate, almost conversational. It responded to attempts at measurement and adaptation, acknowledging human presence without making its intentions fully known. This partial recognition unsettled some, inspired others, and motivated nearly all. Humans had never sought approval, yet they had earned attention. They were no longer simply observed, they were acknowledged, though indirectly, by something far greater than themselves. The growing awareness of humanity's influence sparked new debates among the watchers. Many had underestimated humans' capacity to respond to complex challenges. The species was no longer passive or insignificant. It was active, adaptable, and capable of shaping outcomes that even the most advanced civilizations could not fully predict. Humans' refusal to wait for permission was proving to be not only a strength, but a force that could change the balance of observation, influence, and interaction in the cosmos. In response, humans adapted again. They began to anticipate not only the craft's actions, but potential consequences of its presence. Strategies were formed to mitigate risk, while simultaneously exploring opportunity. Networks of observation grew more sophisticated. Teams of specialists developed simulations, models, and experiments that pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. Every action was an exercise in learning, every failure a step toward mastery. The process was messy, chaotic, and often unpredictably, yet it worked. Humans moved forward not because they were instructed to, but because they understood that movement was necessary. The craft's presence had another effect. It united humanity in ways previously unimaginable. Rivalries faded, temporary or strategic disagreements were set aside, and collective purpose emerged. Even small communities contributed knowledge, data, and insight. Farmers, engineers, artists, teachers, and students all found ways to participate in the growing human effort. Everyone had a role, everyone could contribute, and every contribution mattered. Humanity's independence had always been individual, but now it was becoming collective. Independence was no longer just refusal of permission, it was the assertion of a shared will. The Watchers took note. Humans were demonstrating a capacity that few species ever achieved: the ability to influence, adapt, and create in response to forces far beyond their immediate comprehension. They did not seek validation, they did not await approval, and they did not bend under pressure. Instead, they acted with determination, resilience, and creativity. This was unprecedented. The Council had long assumed that civilizations required structure, hierarchy, and oversight to survive. Humans were proving that independent action, guided by curiosity and choice, could be even more effective. With time, humans began to see the craft not as a threat but as a challenge and a partner of sorts. They interpreted patterns, responded to movements, and developed strategies that gradually allowed them to influence outcomes. The interaction became a dance, a complex, subtle exchange in which both parties observed, adapted, and tested limits. Humans were still small, fragile, and inexperienced, but they were learning quickly. And with every success, no matter how minor, they were asserting themselves in a universe that had once ignored them. The planet itself seemed to respond to the new dynamic. Energy fields, previously undetected, became measurable. Environmental shifts hinted at patterns that were not entirely random. Animals behaved differently in response to signals that humans had only just begun to understand. Humans noticed these changes, studied them, and incorporated their observations into the growing body of knowledge. The interaction was no longer limited to technology. It was expanding to biology, environment, and even culture. Humanity was influencing Earth as well as the universe beyond. At the same time, humans began to experiment with long-range communication. Signals were sent beyond the solar system, carrying patterns of information. Matt.